Well, we're joined now by a student leader and winner in the local election, Jordan Pang. He defeated the vice chairman of the biggest pro-Beijing party, the DAB, who'd represented the Saiwan district for 8 years. And Solicitor Johnny Ip is the deputy spokesman of that pro-Beijing party, the Democratic Alliance for the Betterment and Progress of Hong Kong. Gentlemen, good to have you on the program. So Jordan Pang, you're 21 years old. You defeated an experienced guy in his mid-40s. What was the secret to your success?
Well, I think I would like to say thank you to all the supporters in Saiwan district and my friends and my supporters from HKU and my family members, because well, the support mean a lot to me. And yeah, I think we have to have more youngsters to join the election and to express their views. It's a peaceful way to express their views during this movement. So, well, I think it's a good start.
Jordan, when you say it's a peaceful way to express their views, are you also accepting that when people take to the streets, there are also violent elements? Therefore, Carrie Lam might be right when she says that among the people taking to the streets, there's too much violence.
Well, I'm not rejecting the ways that the youngsters who join so-called violent protest. I think they're just using force, or we can maybe sometimes excessive force, but it's not violence, because we have to understand their motives. But they're just fighting for democracy, but not just like destroying all the things for the sake of destroying all the things. So, well, we have to understand their motives, and I think it's really important for them to understand what the youngsters they are thinking.
Okay, as we try to understand what the youngsters are thinking, let's go to our other guest now, Johnny Ip. So, looking at these election results, 90% of 452 district council seats were won by pro-democracy candidates such as Jordan. After months of protests, there's this local vote. It's as clear as day. When you look at those results, Johnny, don't you feel as if you are on the wrong side of history by being pro-Beijing?
Well, we have to look at the results. There are still 40% of the voters who support the non-violence campaign and do support our camp. So it's only because the electoral system that we are talking about, the first past the post system, that lead to this result of having 85% of the seats being taken by the pan-Democrat. But if we look at all the votes in general, the total number of votes, we have to consider that there are still 42% of the general public, or at least the voters, that support our camp. And
but it's still,
not only support,
it's still a minority view. Certainly, it's still a minority view. 42% is 8% less than 50%.
Well, you cannot ignore the 42% of the general public. Yeah, it's true that there are 58% of the voters who support the pan-Democrats, but you still cannot ignore the 42% of the general public. They still take in a huge a portion of the public's view. So in this consideration, I guess that there is a huge support that that should be ease to the violence protests on the street.
Okay, so let me ask Jordan Pang then. The district that you are representing is a hotspot, right? We've seen some extraordinary scenes of violence there in Saiwan. Somebody was shot at point-blank range there. Some of the protesters were very violent there as well. As you take office, yes, it's a small local election, and one of the reasons why we have you on the show because it's a big deal, and it probably says a lot about the broader picture here. Can you convince the people in your district who don't support the protesters that you also represent them?
I have the same views that we have to fight for democracy and our core values like human rights and rule of law, something like that. And also, if there's a protest in Saigon district, I will surely protect them and to do my best to calm the police down and try not to let the people get hurt.
So Jordan, you say
yeah.
if there's if
I
you
will
say
offer
if there's a protest,
my help in any.
This is interesting because I wonder, after this election win, do you believe that maybe it's time for the people not to take to the streets? Maybe this is an opportunity now to solidify the win, and that on the timeline of protests, there's been an achievement now at the polls, and maybe people don't actually have to take to the streets anymore against Carrie Lam?
I think it's not about the number of votes, but it's like what's right and what's wrong. So as long as they're fighting for something correct, we don't have to look at the numbers.
Johnny Ip, Jordan believes that he's on the side of right and the other side is wrong. What do you think?
Well, I don't think that we have to share this view. We just have to use the election as a kind of way to calm the whole society. We have to say no to violence. I guess Jordan will share the view that it's time for us to cease all the violence on the street. Our society needs to move on, and this election or the result is a good opportunity for us to move on. If the protesters still using this violence method on the street, then the whole society will not be able to move forward in a calm way. So I do urge the newly elected councillors to do something, to at least, try to be the bridge that the councillors' duty has to do, that shares the view of Carrie Lam and shares what the public actually think about those violence or vandalism on the street. I guess that it's time to end all the violence, and it's time for the whole society to move on to, at least to a bright future.
Johnny?
And they have taken many seats in the district, and yes.
Okay, I'm interested to hear your response to what the Chinese have said, Johnny. Chinese state media, quiet initially, and then after a little trickle, it was a deluge of criticism after this local election. So we heard from China Daily in an editorial. They said the result of Sunday's district council election marks a setback for Hong Kong's democratic development, as the results were skewed by the illegal activities of the opposition camp to the benefit of their candidates. They also said the protests severely disrupted the election process. And then Xinhua blamed foreign forces and said the election fell victim to the social unrest. It sounds like sour grapes from Beijing. Johnny, do you accept that? Do you endorse that? Because it sounds as if Beijing is quite rattled by this democratic process that's happening in Hong Kong, even at a local level.
If we look at the 1.5 months of election campaign, we have seen all sorts of vandalism against the current councillors' offices. We have seen vandalism on the street against all kind of public transport and on the road pedestrian as well. And we have seen violent or physical and verbal threat against the candidates from both camps. Well, we have seen petrol bomb being thrown at candidates from our camp, a knife stabbing a solicitor who is also a candidate. And we have also seen our election campaign materials have been destroyed, demolished, or vandalized by all kind of anonymous person. And we have to consider and take into account of all this act to consider whether it's a fair election.
I see.
We will look into all this, and we also ask the government to look into all this as well.
So let me ask, Jordan Pang, did you win because of vandalism and violence and intimidation?
Of course not. No.
Okay, that's enough. That's enough of an answer. I want to ask you, Jordan, about the Polytechnic University and the aftermath of it. the standoff is all but over. Tell me about the lesson that you've learned between the protesters and the authorities. What lesson did you learn after this week-long standoff?
Well, I learned that the government, they're not accepting the people's views and their ideas, and well, they're just trying to use more aggressive way to suppress this movement. Well, it's a wrong way. Obviously, we can see that the winning of the majority seats of the Pan Democrats it's just the result of the violence that the government used. So we can see the government they have been going in a wrong way. So they have to listen to the people's demands. Well, but that's not enough. You have to take actions, like to answer to those 5 demands.
Johnny, the government is not listening and it's not giving proper answers. Is that fair?
Well, it's not fair because the election, this district council election, is also a mean for all the general public to voice out or express their opinion. We do see that there's a majority of people that of voters who do not like or do not agree with the government policy. But there's no means that that is one single factor that the demands by the protester on the street. There are also problems or issues regarding the property prices, housing issues, and other careers problems with the youngster or with other middle-aged people in Hong Kong. So we do agree that we need to urge the government to do more on the policy development in order to answer all those in the public, in the society that answer what they are crying for, and the government need to look closely into all these problems. And it's time for them to answer some of them, like housing and social welfare issues as well.
Right. Okay. And this is all set against the backdrop of some bigger geopolitical issues. The Secretary of State of the United States, Pompeo, slamming China over human rights abuses in Hong Kong. The next time, hopefully, on the Newsmakers, we'll discuss some of those geopolitical implications. But for the moment, let me thank you both, Jordan Pang and Johnny Ip. Thanks so much for joining us on the Newsmakers. Bye-bye.